What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk. We're actually going to be talking with one of my favorite people of all time here, Natalie Jacobsen, the author of the upcoming book Ghost Train, which by the time this releases should be about 2 weeks away from launch, which is freaking amazing. Oh, it's so exciting. All right, so Ghost Train is a beautifully written mix of historical fiction and supernatural mystery. Set in 1877 Kyoto, it follows Maru, a samurai's daughter navigating a world that is rapidly modernizing. The book is full of vivid descriptions, Japanese lore, and an eerie sense of tension that keeps you hooked. Maru's internal conflict, caught between her family's past and an uncertain future, makes her a really relatable character. If you enjoy atmospheric reading with a touch of supernatural, this is the book for you. And yes, I am literally just repeating what I wrote in the Goodreads review, but I enjoyed it, so I'm using it again. Natalie, how are you doing today?
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and having me on the show. Thank you so much.
You know you are always welcome on the show. You are seriously one of my favorite people and probably one of the more intimidating ones. So, So why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and then kind of give us a brief version of Ghost Train yourself.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. It's an honor to be here with Chris. Always a pleasure. Thank you. I'm Natalie. I grew up on the West Coast of the United States. I studied writing, journalism, and media, and then I lived out in Japan for about 6 years as a reporter and photographer. And then my husband and I moved to Virginia, and then now we're in DC. And yes, I'm becoming a debut author this year, and I'm so excited. So thank you so much.
Okay, so what inspired you to write Ghost Train? You did go over this in the interview, which will be linked below for everyone else, but just kind of, summarize where this all came from.
It actually started way back in 2010, which is very scary when you start scrolling back in the years. We are 14 years apart from where I first started it. I was studying Japanese literature and history in college, and I stumbled across this real folklore about ghost trains. They were actually called phantom locomotives, but I thought that was too many syllables, so I shortened it. But yes, they were a real legend back then when trains were just being introduced to Japan during the Meiji Restoration era. And then that was my first foray into what was the main folklore that was coming out of that era. And I realized that it was chock full of stories, and it was deeply fascinating because they had a little bit of Western touches, because that's when they had opened their borders to foreign, economies and relations. But then they were still rooted in their traditions and had their kami and their Shinto gods were still heavily involved in their folklore too. So it was just this huge clash going on. A lot of people were trying to explain the unexplainable. They didn't understand electricity. They didn't understand what all these changes were. So they were trying to figure out ways to explain them and fill in the gaps, and that became folklore. So that was really what got me into it. I can't even remember where I first learned about phantom locomotives, but it was sometime in college when I was researching for a little writing project and a little report, and it just went from there.
My cat is currently scratching up my couch. So, just even kind of reading through this, it kind of dawned on me just how many things in video games alone kind of have the Ghost Train mythology behind it. I mean, Final Fantasy VI is actually a fantastic example of that. That was just such a weird and impactful moment in the game itself, that developing something. There is a PC indie game, I think it's out of the Philippines, that has to do with ghost trains. It's very, very freaky. There's actually quite a lot of good indie ones that are based around the concept, and they're just so well done. But that's a side tangent, you know me. Okay, so let's kind of talk about Maru here. I'm pronouncing that correctly, right?
Yes, yeah.
Nailed it. God, I'm good at this. Is a very complex character, really torn between the tradition and the modern of everything. How did you kind of approach developing the inner conflict?
Great question, and it was challenging, I'm not going to lie. I I have this fault where I need to get these details, and because I want to make sure that people are seeing what I'm seeing. And that goes for characters too. I want them to really know why they're acting a certain way. I want them to feel like they really know a person, or that they could almost be real. And just like, and all of us are multidimensional, complex beings. Like, there's some things that your friend does and you're like, wait, that doesn't fit with your character. So what are explaining those things? What in their family history, what in their childhood would affect them in a way that would make them react? So for her, oh, hi, Kitty. So for her, I had to consider all these little things about things that she had suffered and privileges she had, and what kind of emotion she would have going through these dramatic changes. So it took a lot of research to first know and understand what Japan was going through. And then I did talk to a series of subject matter experts and historians to try to understand what the perspective of maybe a normal citizen, an average citizen, would have been, to kind of breathe a little bit more realistic life into her. And then I did pull from some of my own like emotional experiences, because I really wanted to capture a little bit of her anxiety, a little bit of her grief. And a lot of those things are very difficult to write unless you've been through some situations. So I tried to pull from both very academic sources to get what she would have been witnessing, and then pulling from some experiences and observations in my community, my friends, and to make it more human-like. So it was a process. Each line has been deeply considered, and just I've tried to also give her little backstories that I may never release, and it's just something that's written in notes so that it helps me keep track of why she would say things or act certain ways.
Story Bibles are important, people. I keep saying this. That actually kind of, not on the list, but just kind of off of that, talking about discussing with other people and scholars and all that. Having to get into the mind of somebody not only in a different culture, but a different time period, I could see that being a very daunting thing. How much time, how many pages of notes do you have kind of diving into this and figuring out exactly what the mentality would be?
That's another great question. So it took me I looked at around 3,000 documents, historical documents, firsthand accounts, diaries, government memos, it's thousands of things. Historians were able to help me find like certain creative writings from people from back then too, so I could kind of visualize their language a little bit more, or their thoughts. But then as far as writing about another culture, it was very daunting. I felt like my experience in Japan and having a great Japanese community to work with and speak to really helped. I did work with, sensitivity readers, and I would ask questions all the time to some of my Japanese friends and run things by them. And they actually also imparted some of their own family's personal folklore too, that their grandparents who lived in the Meiji era had learned back then. So actually there are a couple of nuggets dedicated just for them. They will recognize it. So there were some very real pieces that were taken from that time period. Everything written in there was just done with very great care. I didn't want to, take things up to too much of a fantasy level. I didn't want to fetishize or offend anybody. I didn't want to give them a treatment that felt unfair or wasn't doing justice to the era. There's good people, there's bad people. It's a complex, culture just like any other. And I almost feel like I lost my train of thought here.
Well, speaking of trains, oh man, Chris, you are on fire today. The ghost train itself is a very powerful symbol in the story there. Can you talk about the significance of it and what it represents in the context of the changing world?
Yeah, I feel like trains have been a sort of fascination to a lot of countries when they entered their own industrial revolutions, like the United States. North America had their own with the trains going west and their whole controversial manifest destiny. But the trains became a symbol of expansion and progress, and this is great technology. We've never been able to go faster. We've never been able to move faster. So what kind of power do humans have now? And the same thing happened in Japan. They had no idea what was going on in the world at 1854, when suddenly Captain Perry, he was an American soldier and sailor who Abraham Lincoln sent over to Japan to knock on their door basically and say like, hey, it's time to join the world. This isolation period was cute, but there's a lot going on. And then Britain actually donated the first train to Japan. It was about 25% the size of a real train from Europe. But even to the Japanese, that was an incredible sense of power, motion, because up until then too, they had still been relying on goats and wagons and horses to get them from place A to B. It felt very medieval. So the 1870s were a huge transformative period, and the trains became a very huge symbolic of like what was going on in the world, this progress, because it was like night and day. They replaced their transportation.
Yeah, no, it's hard to even imagine just kind of that overall change, and you do a very good job of kind of capturing the atmosphere of everything within the story. And Gracie, stop rubbing against the microphone, please. I'm trying to be professional here. You're making it very difficult. So kind of moving over into the folklore side of things, which, as anyone that follows you on social media knows, is kind of your thing. The book features a lot of folklore, like the kitsune and the eerie. Eerie,
yeah.
Okay. How did you decide which elements of the folklore you wanted to incorporate, and what research went into it?
Thank you. So some of your listeners might be interested to hear this too. Ghost Train was originally a true historical fiction. It did not have fantasy or folklore elements, except in like passing comments. I wanted to actually just replicate the true phantom locomotive legend, in which they believed that they were seeing these ghost trains, but in reality, the conductors were probably delirious. They might have hallucinated, similar to truck drivers today who drive for 12 hours and then they start to see phantom cars or trucks. So it was probably a trick on their eyes, especially because there weren't lights. There were not lights yet. It was dark forests. And the screams and sometimes blood on trains would be probably explained by hitting animals that sadly had no idea what the trains were either. They were not prepared. No one knew what to do. So I wanted that to actually be the real answer. But after some discussions with friends, and they got excited about the premise of, oh, the emperor is doing cruel things and people have no idea, and they think demons, run the train and stuff. So I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I can ask a what if here. And I had been doing so much research too into Japanese literature that I found that folklore was actually very naturally woven in. It was almost as if some of these folklore demons and yurei and ghosts were treated as if they were facts. So I kind of took a little bit of a magical realism approach here. And then in my historical fiction, I followed Maru's grief and her ebbs and flows of like her emotions. And at peaks of her emotions, I was able to slip in instances of maybe she saw something, maybe there was something communicating with her. So it kind of almost throw off the reader. Like, is she an unreliable narrator? Is this something she's hallucinating, or is she really seeing it? Is it a manifestation of her grief? And then the passing comments about folklore was able to be fleshed out a little bit more. And it turned out that it all fit in very naturally. So I was very pleased with that. And again, there were several iterations of it. It took many drafts, many edits, but when I realized that it was a common thing to include folklore in literature naturally, even something that should be nonfiction. Like, Murakami is a very magical realism author who just puts things in and he almost treats it like it's a fact that there's ghosts and things. And so I just had to commit to it basically once I started.
Well, definitely. And I mean, just even approaching it as it's not really fantasy, that's just the world, is a fantastic way of building a world out for a reader that kind of reinforces everything you're doing. And I think you did a masterful job at it. So
thank you.
Okay, moving through, we're going to now talk about Kyoto itself, because you did a fantastic job blending the beauty and the tension within there. How did you kind of balance the historical accuracy with the fantastical supernatural elements?
That was also, I'm going to sound repetitive here, daunting, and a lot of detail and research. I've been to Kyoto a few times. I'm very fortunate to have been there. I had actually a lot of photos and documentation that I even pulled from, because Kyoto is luckily a city that is very much preserved in its tradition and its form that it took in, the 19th century. So we actually see a lot of old Kyoto still today. A lot of the streets would have remained the same, except for some buildings that were coming up. And Kyoto was one of the first cities that was explored by foreigners, and they brought cameras. So there are some photos from the 1800s of old Kyoto. So I really took time to make sure that I was still following these old maps and making sure that these streets had like the samurai dwellings, or this is where the castle was in relation to the university or the market, where were the bridges and where would they have crossed. And then from there, I was able to pinpoint where were the shrines or where would ghosts or different demons have lurked. So because I could kind of almost layer then the folklore stories on top. And I knew that they were relegated to different wards or different parts of the city. So if she was crossing into here, that's where demon's territory was. Or if she was over here, that's where she would have seen this ghost. So it pulled in a lot of different stories and wove them together in that sense, so that each part of Kyoto kind of represented something else.
That's such a cool detail. Like, oh, the amount of detail and effort you put into this is staggering. I personally don't know of any other writer that has put that much research and effort into something, and it's remarkable. It's remarkable. Oh.
It's my type anus.
Like I said, intimidating as fuck. Okay, now let's move on to the supporting characters there. We have Adakichi. And Mitsu.
Yep.
Yes. Each bring unique pressures into Maru's life there. How do their interactions kind of shape Maru's choices throughout the book?
Yes, excellent. Excellent question. They were very pivotal, and I wanted to also give them human kind of sides to them too, because they couldn't just be bullies or the villains. They also had to have a human side to them, because in reality, I would hope no one would tolerate kind of constant abuse and bullying like that. I pitch Ghost I froze for a second. I do pitch Ghost Train as a Cinderella meets Princess Mononoke. So the tea house that she works in with Mitsu and Adakichi, I kind of see as her Cinderella story a little bit. So yes, they are not nice people. They're very taken aback by Maru's sudden appearance, and that they have to take care of her as a favor to her father. And it's just an inconvenient situation for all of them involved. But I wanted to also capture the obligation. Adakichi felt she had an obligation to Maru, and Mitsu, she was alone in the tea house beforehand, so having Maru is a little bit of different life. So there's a little bit of that push and pull of like jealousy, but then also like, okay, there is company, there's someone to help. So I had to balance and make sure that they had their good moments, and they had then also their tough tension moments as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed actually writing those parts, because I wanted it to be kind of a Cinderella thing a little bit, but also give Maru kind of those nuggets of like, keep going. Like, she didn't have a father or parent figure in most of the book pretty much. And so Adakichi took that role on, because Maru was she's a late teenager, but in Japan, since she had been a samurai's daughter, she was very privileged. So she had not really lived out on her own or experienced a lot of things. So Adakichi kind of filled in that role of Maru still like respecting her as an older adult, and then Mitsu as a sister she never had, and like a wondering like, why won't she treat me right kind of thing. So it was Maru's constant need to pivot and try to avoid confrontation, but also trying to earn their respect as well. So each conversation had those kind of two goals in mind.
Very much a strength through adversity type of situation. And it's great. As much as we hate seeing our favorite characters kind of put through things like that, in the end it's what defines them, and it's kind of what shows them their own path. And I love it. I love it so much. All right, so as we kind of run closer to the end here, what message are you hoping and feeling that the readers are going to walk away from Ghost Train?
Well, I think you kind of nailed it on the head there, like the adversity thing. I really want people to see that, people can grow and overcome difficult obstacles, and not just like maybe see parts of themselves in Maru. I know that sometimes people are detached from characters, and that's okay, but maybe they learn something from someone else. Maybe, I hope above everything else, they do kind of see that I am staying true to a lot of historical elements. So maybe if they don't feel anything emotionally, maybe they can come away having learned something about Japan or history, especially a time period and era that maybe is not studied as much, at least in the West. But then I also want to kind of remind people that they're not alone in adversity. It can feel very isolating, very alone, but it is good to try to reach out and trust others to aid you in your quests, however big or small they are.
Definitely. And I will say, make sure to have a notebook with you so you can keep track of a lot of the things. And there is a glossary.
There is a glossary, yes.
Very, very important. I'm just saying, do not be intimidated by it. It's okay. The information is there. So much research went into it, and I'm pretty sure you put like 90% of it back into the book in some form.
That'd be probably a close estimate, yeah.
So there are moments in the novel that are very deeply reflective and others that are very tense and eerie. How did you kind of approach maintaining the pacing throughout this story?
Pacing, I think, is one of the hardest things for writers to take upon, and a skill to develop. And it was, for me, my hardest aspect as well, because frankly, I had written a 400,000 word book. Ghost Train is only 110,000 words. So we are about a third of the way through the story by the end of it, technically. So to me, Ghost Train had been seen as the first one, so it was a little bit more of a slow burn, and therefore it had a lot of details in the world building. But I did also need to obviously raise stakes and start to show that, wait, this world is not all as it seems. There's something off about it, and what is that? So I had to preserve it. I wanted in the first couple chapters it to be preserved as like this historical place, and then there's just one thing off. And then in each chapter, you kind of add a few more until you're like, wait, something is really wrong here. And it's the same as like in real life. You might not notice you're at a tipping point until you are overwhelmed with something. And it's the same thing in the book. I wanted to kind of creep up with these little clues that a reader might pick up on, but maybe not Maru. And you want to scream at Maru and help her out, especially by the end.
You did a masterful job at it. The pacing and the ebbs and flows are very nicely done. I was very impressed. Yeah, and then I guess the final one before we jump into the kind of fun shit that I didn't tell you about. What can we expect more of in this world? Is there more? What different things are you planning to explore?
So there are 2 more books that are already written. I am waiting to see how the sales go, and then the publisher says that they will take a look at them. So I need enough copies to be sold for the publisher to be convinced to continue. But it does actually, book 2 does pick up right after the end. Not to say it was a cliffhanger, because I do believe like I was able to satisfactorily tell the story I wanted of Maru, but if I can continue, there is a lot more to her adventure and her purpose.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's the kind of ending I enjoy, where you're closing off the story of the moment, but the world is still open enough that there's tons left to explore. You feel completion while still wanting more. Like that's what I love. I love that shit so much. Okay, so that has been amazing and so fantastic. But now we're just gonna have some fun. I've got a couple extra questions here that I didn't warn you about prior, and are kind of weird. We're gonna see how they go. We're gonna see how it goes. If Maru was living in today's world, what modern job do you think she'd have?
Ooh. Immediately I thought barista. And it's not because she's in a tea house. I think she would still be kind of looking for herself in some way. And I do think that, I think the beauty of retail and barista type roles is that it gives you a chance and that freedom to explore other things. You're not necessarily locked down at a desk and needing to serve all these stakeholders. And she would have a chance to meet a lot of people and hear different stories and maybe be inspired or make a connection that sends her off somewhere else on an adventure or journey. So that was kind of my first instinct, especially given her age. She's kind of pre-college age or right in there for a modern time. And so I think that would be maybe something she'd be doing.
And absolutely nothing gives you more adversity than working in some form of service.
She would be wanting to throw a lot of copies at people.
I mean, not saying I have, not saying I haven't in my time, so, All right, if you could have one of the yokai from the novel as a companion, which one are you choosing and why?
Oh, I mean, it's so hard not to pick the kitsune.
I know, but you know what? We're taking that one off the table because it's too mainstream. It's too mainstream.
It is very mainstream. It's very mainstream. There's a little funny one that I really like that I kind of mentioned. Oh, never mind. I'm going to go with the Oni that guards Shinto shrines. So I think those guys generally they're pretty giant. They cause a lot of terror, but above all else, they are guardians. So while they look mean and nasty and kind of ugly and scary, they're actually there to protect gods or whatever is enclosed in the shrine. So maybe that'd be kind of cool walking around with one of those or having them nearby, just in your corner.
I can't disagree. Not as cute though. Be nice to have a little cute guy kicking around you. That'd be good.
I agree.
All right.
Pocket sized.
All right. We're gonna pull this one, and I'm very curious to know your answer to this one. If and when Ghost Train becomes a movie, who is your dream cast for Maru, Adakichi, and Mitsu?
I was just thinking about this the other day. It's very hard to not say Anna, and I can't remember her last name, but she's the star. She plays Marie in Shogun. She's pretty demure. I think she's a great actress. She can be quiet, but then also forceful. I think she would do it, but I think she is also maybe older than maybe Maru would be. So maybe also the Maru hasn't been discovered yet. Adakichi. I mean, I'll go really mainstream and also non-Japanese, but Michelle Yeoh. It's someone maybe similar to her, very ethereal, powerful presence who can turn her personality on a dime and be, she has a little bit of a snap to her, but then she can also soften and be a maternal figure at the same time. Mitsu. You know what? Maybe I'll also say the other one who would, Stephanie Sue. Stephanie Hisu? She was in Everything Everywhere All at Once with Michelle. Also, she's not Japanese either, but I think I think she could be similar to Michelle in the sense that she could be kind of a boisterous, rival to Maru, but then also be sometimes that sister in arms that Maru wants.
Love it. So what we're going to do right here, folks, is I'm going to put up the answer she's going to send me in probably a couple days when she replays the question in her head and comes up with better answers. I'm going to list them right here on screen for you all to see. So there is proof that, she did think about it, because you're going to. We know it's going to be playing in your head for a bit.
Yeah, I'm going to be torturing myself over here.
So, once the research is done, she's got 10 pages ready to go. She's done the pro-con list for everything. She'll have the solid list, and it'll be right here. All right. And in the spirit of festivals, like the one in your book, if you could attend any cultural festival around the world that you haven't already done, what is one you would love to see before you die?
I can't remember the technical name for the color festival in India. I've never been to India. I always see those pictures and I have massive FOMO, and it's not just for the gram. I think it's a beautiful spiritual celebration from everything I've learned about it. And I know very little about Indian culture. I've studied some of the Buddhism because Japanese Buddhism came from India through China, but I would love to go to India and hopefully time it for some kind of celebration or festival, including that one.
That would be honestly fantastic. I think that would be so good. And the food. Oh, the food.
No food.
All right, and then the final thing I need you to do, which is very, very important here. Okay, it's the second final thing. The penultimate thing I need you to do here. Sell us the book in one line.
One line. Okay.
One sentence. Why should everyone buy this book?
Ooh. Okay. Buy the book because in Ghost Train, you're going to step back into 1877 Kyoto and you're going to slay some demons.
Oh, that was good. You know what? For right off the that was solid. I will take that one. We're going to put that one on a poster. I dig it. I dig it. And then finally, where can everyone find you and your book?
Thank you. My website is najacobsen.com. It's with S-E-N. And then my handle on all major social media platforms is at Natalie Anna J. And Ghost Train is in your favorite bookstore right now, hopefully, soon.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We're on the countdown. It's almost single digits at this point.
It's so scary.
It was just crazy. And if you guys haven't seen any of the hype train, I don't know how you've missed it because it's everywhere. You have a fantastic team behind you, so many supportive fans and people gearing for everything that it's kind of heartwarming and intimidating. Again,
it's been so sweet, and you've been such a great advocate and support. Thank you, Chris.
I got you. As for everyone else, thank you so much for being here. My name is Chris Corvan. You can find me everywhere at Chris of the Void. Make sure to follow all the Creative Coffee Cafe channels and community and news. And by this point, the Patreon will be up and running. So if you want to see anything else we've got cooking, which is a lot of shit, there's a lot of shit going on. I'm very tired. Please help. Support us and help me. I need sleep.
Send Chris coffee and sleeping pills.
Thank you all so much for being here. Natalie, thank you again for being here. It has just, every time I chat with you is just amazing. We're going to just keep coming back on. It'll be fantastic.
Thank you.
And everyone else, we'll see you later.